Welcome. Thank you for coming. My name is Erifily. I'm a Feldenkrais practitioner and a yoga teacher. And today I want to talk about a subject that is very near and dear to my heart because my degree was in graphic design. And I have been spending a long time in front of the computer. And I continue to do so, especially now. So I want to start with a screen share, because we will be starting with theory. We will be bringing it to the floor. And then from the floor, we will come back to our chairs and with the help of the feedback of the floor, find the same sensations in sitting. I want you to just close your eyes and think for a moment. What does the word posture mean for you? When you hear the word posture, what comes up? What pictures come up in your brain, and what images, and what does it make you think of? And then for a few moments, can you think of your body? Can you feel your weight? If you're sitting on a chair, how is the weight distributed on each hip? And how do you feel the soles of your feet if they're touching the ground? Can you feel the weight all along your spine? Can you feel the weight of your head over your shoulders? Can you really imagine your width and your breadth and your shape, this three-dimensional living object that is your body? Can you stop and think about it for a moment? Can you feel your bones, your muscles, and your skin? What I want to do today is start from something that might seem a bit irrelevant or out there. But I promise you, I will come back and it will all blend in the end and show you why it is so very important to change our way of thinking if we want to change the way we are sitting. So it's about changing our thought model. It's about challenging ourselves to create a new model of thinking. So I will explain why I believe that the perfect posture doesn't exist, and what are the things that we have been exposed to that slowly informs how we think about bodies and how we think about sitting and posture, and why it is so important to really challenge our point of view. It's less about finding this perfect theorem, geometrical theorem of posture, and more about exploring the possibilities and finding other ways to think about our bodies. So look, it all begins with this thought. It's that our body is not an object. It is a process. It is a living process. We are not a cup, a book. We're more like a plant or a tree. We grow, we change, our cells change. Our skin is not the same after a few years. Our liver and lungs, we get hurt and we heal ourselves. We are a process, a living, breathing process. So when we are sitting or standing, what we're doing is being in a dynamic equilibrium. It is not this stale pose. It is the beginning of a potential action. Even if you are sitting immobile, or what we think of being immobile, we are moving with every breath. We are moving with every thought. When your eyes move and when your diaphragm moves, as your blood circulates, you are moving. When movements stop, life stops. So what we can consider the word posture is like a snapshot of a film. It's just an instance in time. And although it can be very helpful as an idea to remind ourselves to find good posture, it also limits us in a way, because it limits us in the way that we try to stay there. We lock ourselves in this good posture. So now this is one of my favorite concepts around the body. Feldenkrais trainer Larry Goldfarb talks about he talks about the unseen side of the movement. I call it the dark side of the movement because it sounds cooler. But the idea is that even if you raise your hand, what we usually perceive as movement is the movement of the arm. What is he doing? What is she doing? Oh, she's raising her arm. She's turning her head. What we don't think of and is less obvious is the counterbalance, the unseen part of the movement. So in order for me to lift my arm, something else has to come down. In order for me to lift my arm, my whole torso, my whole musculature of the chest and the low back and the upper back is changing in order to support me in this movement. So one movement cannot be limited in one part of the body. We are like the sails of a boat. We are like a spider's web. If you tug on it from one direction, the whole of it will change shape. And it's interesting to keep that model of the body as we continue on. Another thing that's very common and very important to make the distinction is the difference between average and normal. Because even us anatomy trained geeks start off with a book and a plastic skeleton that is universal. It's the same in every laboratory and in every country. And it's just a model supposed to be helping you learn the names of the bones and their shape. But what another of my favorite teacher, a yin yoga teacher, Paul Greeley, teaches us, and he's done a wonderful research about it, is how really different our skeleton can be. So I'm hoping you're not squeamish. Here are a few sacrums, the back bone of the pelvis, the back side of the pelvis. On the bottom, you can see 3 different normal specimens. They're not abnormal in any way. They're just different. And a lot of time when we're talking about the body, we're talking about this average body. But average doesn't exist. The human skeleton has so many variations. And that is why there is no perfect exercise, and there is no the perfect posture, and there's no perfect chair. That's one of the biggest problems in ergonomics, is that you're not catering to one average. Each individual skeleton has an individual shape, and what is comfortable and useful for someone might not be for someone else. So here, again, a photo by Paul Greeley, and you can see the side of the pelvis. So on the right, you can see the tailbone, and these little white circles are where the hip socket is. So it's where the head of the femur comes into the socket of the pelvis. You can clearly see that these two are very, very different. And there's nothing wrong with either of them. They were normal people. And these are 2 extremes. There's a whole range between them. So each individual skeleton will have a slightly different hip socket. And that is why some people prefer to sit cross-legged, and some people find it very uncomfortable. And for me, it's very important to be able to trust your sensations, to be able to trust your own body. Trying to find these solutions, and of course, because marketing, people will tell you what you need and how you feel sometimes even. So for me, awareness of the body is very important. And changing our concept about what the body is very important, because it gives us the power to really trust the way our body feels. So if I want to sit cross-legged on my computer chair, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with me or that I will injure my hips in any way, because I have learned to trust the way I feel. Now, the way we see our body, I could actually make a really long webinar about that too. It's one of my favorite subjects. So let's take the spine, for example. Can you close your eyes again and think of where your spine is in relation to your chest, in relation to your shoulder blades? Can you feel it if it's closer to the front or closer to the back of your body? How far back? And see now, if you look at the slide, on the left, you can see a spinal cord. This is an MRI of a spinal cord. And on the left, you see the discs. And on the right are the processes. So the processes are those little bumps you can feel in your back. And when I first realized that those little bumps are not my spine in the way that they are those that carry my weight, I was actually shocked. It had never occurred to me that the spine is a lot more in front, is a lot more in the center of our body. And my mother-in-law got me a book for Christmas, like this whole huge book of CTs and MRIs. I'm lucky. And you can see on the right, the whole MRI. So you can see on the left, the chest, and on the right, the back. And you can see how much further inside the body the spine really is. If you look around the belly area, just before the spine becomes the sacrum, it's almost in the middle of the body. And I always find that, all those little ways, all those little tweaks between how our body really is and what are the images we have in our mind can be very interesting to clear up, because it helps us get a clearer body image. And then there's this idea that's been grinded into us since we were kids. Sit up straight, proper, immobile, tense, rigid. What does proper mean? What does straight mean for the body? What does slouching mean? And there's all this emotional state involved with our posture too. You have to stand proud. You have to be beautiful, especially for girls. You have to be pretty, like a ballerina. And for boys, you have to be strong, opening the chest wide. Now, these ideas become meshed into what we think about the body and what we think that standing and sitting and posture is. So when we sit at the desk, we think that we need to stand straight and have a proper posture. But how do we do this? Because if straight and proper and posture means that we need to be erect and immobile and tensing in order to stand, then we're really not helping ourselves. We're using too much muscle power and we're not flexible. We don't allow the rest of our body to follow the movement of our hands, of our head, of our eyes. If you look at spine from the front, yeah, it's pretty much straight. But if you look at it from the side, there's quite a bit of curvature there. And the curvature is there to protect us. The curvature doesn't exist when we're born. It slowly develops as we learn to stand and to walk. and it turns our spine into a spring. It protects our spine from every step. If our spine was indeed straight, it would have been destroyed after a few years of pushing down with every step. So straight doesn't mean good. And curves don't mean necessarily bad. One other thing we usually think of when we hear of spinal curves are medical conditions, because the only time people speak of our spinal curvature is when they're talking about their lordosis or their kyphosis. And these are diseases of the body, but there are also natural curves. So it depends on the degree. A lordotic spine means that the degrees of curvature might be exceeding what is considered normal or average. And then you may have people with lordosis that don't have back pain. So it's pretty tricky business. The point, and I'm finishing up with anatomy here, is that the secret is just this. It's just this slide. The secret in sitting effortlessly in this posture, this dynamic posture that is the beginning of each of our movements, is to being able to allow the pelvis to move freely. Now, as you see, the pelvis has two rounded sit bones, and you could imagine it as a rocking chair. When you rock your pelvis, when the pelvis is free enough to be rocked forward and back, you're free to change the shape of your spine. You're free to allow your center to follow the movements of your hand or your head. So instead of using the muscles in your hands, the smaller muscles in their hand, the smaller muscles in your neck that are supposed to be there for stability, instead of using them to work, you're working from your center. But in order to be able to start the movement from your center and to allow the whole of the body to follow, just like the web, the spider web we talked about before, and not create places of tension where the spider web tries to go in one direction and you're pulling it in the other. In order to do that, you have to be able to have your pelvis free. And many times, our chairs and especially our couches, which are like quicksand, don't help us do that. And in our floor segments later on, we will be experiencing exactly this. Because telling you is one thing. What I want you really today is to experience it. The difference that the movement of the pelvis can make for your spine and how it actually helps your spine change shape. So now, why is this important? You might be sitting on your chair and be fine, even if you're a bit sore after many hours. It's to be expected. Well, this is very important for one reason. It's because function and structure have a very important relationship. So in short term, your function will follow your structure. So if I have to move, I will move in a way that my bone structure allows me to. Remember the different pelvises from Paul Greeley? It's the same in every bone. So my muscle tension and my bones are what will make me move. My movement, my function will follow the way I'm structured. I can open my arms as much as my shoulders allow. I can open my legs as much as my hips allow. But in long term, it is the opposite, the exact opposite. It is the structure, the function that will define your structure. So I don't know if you've ever been out on the street and you see really old lady that's bent and you wonder how she got there. She got there how we get there, one day at a time. So it's very important to really consider that. Every day will change your shape if you do it long enough. If you're allowing your head to drop forward if you're allowing your shoulders to droop or your back to be rounded all the time in front of your computer, this is your shape. Your muscles and your fascia, your connective tissue, will be pulling your bones, and slowly but surely, they will make this new position your structure. Just like the wind makes the tree follow its path, just like water grooves the Grand Canyon. So, okay, that's the bad news. What are the good news? The good news is that we really don't need much to help ourselves and our future selves. We don't need some crazy regime of fitness, or what we need is self-care. And it has always been mind-boggling to me how movement is not included in self-care. Simple movement. So the dentist is my favorite example. You go to the dentist once or twice or 3 times a year. You don't expect yourself to fix your own teeth, of course, but you brush your teeth every day, several times a day. And you never think that you have to go to your dentist every day and have him brush your teeth, right? So what I'm talking about today is exactly that, is those simple, easy movements that can take 1 minute or 3 or 5, that you can really introduce into your daily routine and have them make the difference. This is the idea behind these 2 lessons we're gonna have now. These are Feldenkrais lessons. They're called Awareness Through Movement. So we will have a 5-minute break, have a bit of time also to digest part of this discussion. So I emailed you that on the floor I would be needing a yoga mat, and if you have a blanket or a beach towel, and then a pair of socks, because we will be wanting our feet to slide as if we were ice skating. So thank you very much, and I'll see you in 5 minutes.